G'day everyone, Dikko here with another kick-ass walkthrough. This is part 3 of a multi-part series covering character rigging in Blender. So let's jump right in. So, as you can see here, we have Ragnar here from the previous video. We're going to start rigging this guy up. And we have to do a few things as a precaution before we start. A few little housekeeping things. So if you haven't done it already, well, you should have because I sent you the damn file. Is to make sure everything's nicely organized. If you have your own model, make sure you organize everything nice and cleanly. You have all your geometry in a collection. You have all your, other things that you might use in the scene in their own collection. So in this case, I have cameras and lights all in their own little collection. And if you have any dynamics, make sure you hide them. In this case, the hair, for instance, which I have dynamics for, will be the very last thing that I rig probably, so I'm not going to worry about that too much right now. So, I want to hide anything that has like hair patches, because they're separate geometry. If you've done it in this method, make sure if you haven't, and you haven't directly pinned to your mesh, that you turn off the anything that with dynamics or anything like that. Like so. So we just have a straight up plain geometry. You want to be at the sort of lowest level of subdivision as well to make things perform really nicely and smoothly. So firstly, I'm going to save that file. And you see that I have multi-resolution modifiers and solidify modifiers and everything. So I've turned those off in the viewport. And to make things perform even better, what I like to do whilst doing my rigging setup, or just rigging in general, I like to go into my render settings here and turn on simplify. And if you expand the simplify window, you can set your max subdivision to 0, and that will remove any subdivision in the scene. So it'll give you a very low resolution base to work from, and it will allow you to manipulate your rigs and manipulate your geometry in the smoothest fashion possible. So make sure that happens. So, with that out of the way, we can see that we have a pretty decent setup here. Pretty simple rig as in terms of geometry. We have a nice quadded up structure, very well distributed. I mean, the face is a little bit dense, obviously, but we can deal. So, the first thing I want to do, and I'm going to hide this as well. I'm going to hide the hair tie for now, because I don't need that for now. That'll probably be one of the last things I do as well. I want to just have the most basic level of geometry to start planning out my rig. So with that out of the way, and if you just have a base rig, a base mesh with just no clothes or anything like that, this is fine as well. But eventually we'll have to test it out. So to save, we're going to save this file. I'm going to save this as a new file. I'm going to put this in a new folder as well. So I'm going to put this in my next streaming folder and call it, I don't know, rig. Save it there, and I'm going to call it Ragnar rig. _001. And the reason I'm starting with 001 because I guarantee you that we will have multiple versions here. I mean, some of my versions can go up to the 50s, 60s, maybe even 70s. In some cases, it's ridiculous. So with that out of the way, we can start planning our rig. A nice little feature in Blender as well is we can disable the selection of mesh objects, which is really cool. So I'm going to just disable the selection there. And I'm going to just make a brand new collection and call that rig. A new collection, call that rig. And inside that rig collection, I'm going to add a single joint or a single bone. And before I start on that, I'm going to turn on a few things in the viewport. Namely, I'm going to set the viewport display for this armature to be in front at all times so I can always see it. So it's basically X-ray mode if you're coming from Maya. And I'm also going to display the joints as wire, and that will give me a nice nice means to just visualize what's going on. And if you every now and then you'll find yourself that you probably want to turn off and on geometry visualization in the wireframe. So always make sure you know where that is, and you can disable that for now. So without further ado, let's start planning out the layout of our basic joint chain for our rig. So this will change in the future as we get into more complicated systems, but to start off with, you want to start very simply And that is basically set up the legs, set up the arms, set up the main parts of the body. And we'll worry about the face, we'll worry about the eyes, we'll worry about any complexities like twists and tune stuff later. The first thing we want to figure out is where to place the joints and where they will be best articulated for that particular model. So always start with an experimental mindset. You're going to start very simply. So with that in mind, let's go into edit mode with this joint. And the bone, sorry. If you're coming from Maya, if you're familiar with Blender, they're called bones. In Maya, they're called joints. And that's the main difference between Maya and Blender, is that when you create a armature system or any sort of armature object in Blender, they come in the form of bones, where they're effectively two joints that are linked together through a bone. In Maya, they are individual objects. These little things are individual objects that have a relationship once you parent them to one another, but it's a little bit different in Blender. Anyway, moving on. With that in mind, one more thing I want to turn on in the visualization, and that is in the armature settings here. In viewport display, I want to turn on axes. That is super important, and I have that on almost 100% of the time until the end of the rigging process. So turn that on, and you can see that we have an axis available for us there. Okay. Starting from the root joint or the global joint, I'm going to just go and rotate this guy down. Let me turn on my screencast key so you can see what's going on. Rotate this joint and you'll see an issue there. I want to have it rotate from the center there. So with that in mind, let's switch it over to individual origins. And you will see that by switching that to individual origins and or just active element, sorry, you'll see that the axis or the point of origin actually shifts to the bottom of the bone, which is great for us. So I want to just rotate this down in the opposite direction. So Z is pointing up there, and this will become our global control in the future. So leave that as is, and I want to turn off deform on that joint. So I don't want it to deform. It will just be a structural joint, and we'll worry about naming them later. Next thing I want to do, make a new joint or a new bone, and this will become our center of gravity control, the center of our setup here. So I'm going to lift that up. Why is it not moving? All right, so I want to move that up into the center of our setup there. And if you find that you're having trouble finding things, you can always finding where your hips will sit inside the clothing. If you have like a base mesh, that's fine. You can probably just use the base mesh as a reference. Otherwise, you can always hide mesh objects if you need to. Like so. Hide it and see where the hips are sitting. So in this case, they're sitting around here, and I'm happy to put the bone there for now. And finally, I'm going to have it sit at around this point. And then I'm just going to extrude up in the Y in this case. That's why it's not. It was having trouble. I can switch it back to global for now, and the axis orientation will suit. If I switch it back to bounding box center, I'll now have the control of the location of where I'm playing with the which part of the bone am I manipulating. So top or bottom. So I'm just going to make a joint chain that sits up until about the clavicle area, and I'm going to subdivide that about, let's say about this many times. Four bones should do the trick. If you ever need to scale it down a little bit, you can. Just all you gotta do is select the points here and then bring it down here like so. So what I want to do is have one major joint for the top of the rib cage, because the rib cage itself isn't all that flexible. It's the middle section, the mid section of the torso that generally has the most amount of flexibility. So you can actually play with it that way. So in this case, we're going to distribute the joint setup in a relatively even manner, like so. So we get something like this, where we have a set of joints in the most flexible part of the body, being the middle of the torso, the abdomen. And then we have a rigid part of the body, which is the top of the or the the chest area, the chest cavity, basically. All right, that will do. And I might hide the belt and all that sort of shit as well, because I don't need that for now. All right. Next part we need to do is the neck. So I'm just going to extrude up into the base of, around the base of the ear in this case. So around here, because that's where the the base of the skull is sort of articulating from. And again, one more for the head, like so. All right. Next thing I want to do is the shoulders. So the shoulders are pretty simple. I'm just going to in this case, I'm going to duplicate one of these joints and just rotate it like so. And we'll talk about joint orientation toward the end here, but let's just lay out the basic principles here. And I'm not going to do both the left and right individually. I'm going to just make one side in Blender and then mirror the other side. Okay, and this is where Blender is like supreme at. I just love this system here. The cool thing about Blender's mirroring system is that it's not based on location of the joint, it's based on the name. Naming convention is really important in Blender. So just for now, I'm just going to put the name .l. Alright, we'll worry about that in a second. We're just going to do one side first. Okay. And the same for the hips. I'm going to put another section like so. I'm just going to extrude out a bone from the base there. You can do that by just pushing E on the keyboard. Extrude out the bone. Alright, cool. Next thing I'm going to do is just the arms. So I'm just going to make the arms. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to just extrude out the arms structure like so. Out. So it fits the length of the arm. And if you turn on the wireframe, you can know, and if you have a proper edge flow, you should have an idea of where that elbow is sitting. So in this case, the elbow is sitting around here, so we can always bring that that bone to sit at around the right spot in 3D space. Another cool thing about Blender is that it has volume snapping. So if you're having trouble finding that right volume, just turn on volume snapping, and you can snap it to the center of the volume of that part of the mesh, which is fucking awesome. Alright. Do the same thing for the wrist, just snap it to the center of the volume there. And we're good to go. Alright, let's do the same for the legs. And the knees are sitting around that area here. So I'm just going to extrude out some legs. Up until the heel there. And then the foot. And then we're going to extrude out in the Y at around that spot here. So this is our basic setup here. All right. Cool. So that's the actual majority of the joints we need for the basic deformation of the body. All right. And with that in mind, let's quickly clean up some of this. We're going to have to make sure that our orientations are the right way as well. We want to make sure that things are nice and centered. So this is why it's really important to pick. You remember how in the first video I talked about picking a primary axis? This is where that all begins. So save the file. And in this case, along the spine, it's kind of already set up for us. But if it's not, for me, I'm going to choose my primary axis as X. So when I rotate in the X, it rotates the body back and forth. And for that, you can see that the X is pointing in the right direction along that axis. So if I were to rotate the inside of pose mode, if I were to rotate the joints right now, you'll see that if I rotate in X, it's going to rotate in X, as you can see there. And if I rotate forward, you can see it's rotating in a positive number along the X because of the way that the Z axis is oriented forward. So we're going to do the same thing along the arms and the legs. So I want to make my primary axis of rotation. So in this case, my most commonly used rotation here is forward, bending the body forward. So I want to have a positive number when I bend the body forward. And that's why I set it to Z facing forward there. In this case, with the legs, we want to have the the primary axis to bend backwards, I think, because the knees are bending forward like that. I want to have my primary axis for the legs bending along the x-axis in this way with a positive number, because that's the most commonly used rotation that I'll be using. So in that case, you can see that the axes are all out of whack. And to fix that, we need to change the bone roll. And in that case, I can actually change it through either this little interface here on the right side here. I could change it using the roll tool in Blender, like so. Or I could just push Ctrl R to change the roll like that. I'm going to be a bit more precise, so I'm just going to use the roll tool here on the side. And I'm going to type in 0 to see it reset to 0. And generally speaking, if you just type in 0, the axis will just align properly. It just will align to the with Z going back in a straight line, basically, toward negative Z. And I'm going to do the same thing for these, but in this case, I want to make sure that the alignment is the same across all the bones going down this chain. And I can do that relatively easily by just selecting these bones here, select the last bone, and push Shift-N. And I want to set the bone roll, or the bone orientation if you're coming from Maya or some other software, to the active bone. So that's really cool. So using this the bone roll from this bone here, I can just basically shift all the orientation of these bones to match this one. And we're golden. All good. So now that one's all sorted. So if we go to pose mode and now rotate on the X there, it's rotating in a positive number on the X, rotating in a positive number on the X there, and rotating in a positive number on the X there. So now it's nice and consistent, basically, except here at the end there, it's a bit wonky. So we can fix that up manually. I'm going to go into my settings here and just switch the roll to 0 again. And in this case, the bone roll is pointing up. In this case, I don't think I want that. So I want to just switch the bone roll to -1, or just 180. Just to keep that roll going down the chain a bit more consistently. Just for now. And if we have to change it in the future, that won't be a problem. It will be fine. And I'm just going to make sure it's all nice and straight. Z going down, Z going out, in the same sort of pattern, basically. Not too concerned about the hip joint, because that's going to be parented to the spine here. So I'm not too concerned about that. And let's do the same thing for the arm. So the arm, its most primary axis, again, is the bending forward like so. Like this. So I want to do the same thing along the joint chain, along the arm. Let's recalculate that bone roll. I'm going to just see where it does by default. So by default, it's pointing in a direction that I'm not keen on. So I want to basically roll the bone in this sort of direction, this basic sort of direction. And based on the direction in which your arm is resting, it's up to you. So basically, you want the bone roll in this case with the Z pointing outwards toward, outward in the opposite direction of the elbow, basically. So whichever direction your elbow is pointing, you want to sort of align it to that in a general sense. So in this case, I want to sort of line it up in this kind of direction. And I think that works for me, around that sort of direction. And then for the rest, I'm just going to align the shoulders, and the forearm to the bicep, essentially. Oops, wrong one. This one, and this one, and to this one. There we go. Active bone. And you can see the shoulders have aligned to that bone there and that bone there. And if we go into pose mode and just test that out along the X, it's rotating in a direction that I think will work for this character. And actually, it's a bit off. I might have it align a bit more toward the thumb there. So I'm going to change the roll to suit that. So let's get it to something like that. So it's sort of lined up with that forearm and the thumb in the right sort of direction. And I might have the bicep aligned to that too. So have it align a little bit more to that sort of direction. Like so. Alright, let's test that out. Rotate X in the in its local orientation, so just switch it to local. Rotate X and just see where that's traveling. And it looks like it's traveling all right in the right direction. I might change it just a little bit more to get that roll looking a little bit more in tune with what I want. There we go. I think that will be fine. And that's looking pretty good. So when I rotate the bicep in the X, that looks pretty good. So it looks not bad. I think that works all right. And you can finish with this all you want. It just depends on how your arms are oriented in this case. So I'm going to roll it just a little bit further. I might align it a little bit more with the forearm. There we go. So let's see how that looks. And you can test both rotations by going to individual origins and rotating both at the same time. I think that looks pretty good. Quite happy with that result. Okay. And again, if we have to, we can always change it once we skin it, and if you're not too happy with the orientations, we can always fix that up later on. All right, let's move to the hand. Let's extrude out a hand. And I have a little trick for this. I'm going to just subdivide this. And with normal orientation turned on, we can just move that down. And you can see we're getting a nice clean extrusion basically along the normals of that bone, because somehow in Blender bones have normals. All right. So I just want to get it to around this area here in the hand, like so. All right, let's get those. Let's get this the finger set up. All right, so all we need to do is duplicate the this part of the hand, because what we want to do, we want to get the metacarpals up and running first. So we're going to duplicate that and sort of place it at just at the base of the first knuckle there. And I might just move it across just like so. And I can turn back on my volume snapping just for that. Just to get it in a sort of the main fleshy part of the hand. And we can always alter that after the fact. Duplicate that. Line it up. Duplicate. Line it up. Duplicate. Line it up. Just like that. Sort of like to get it in sort of the general sort of structure of the metacarpals on your hand. Because they are really important when it comes to the way that a hand is, I guess, deformed when you are controlling it. All right. Next thing I'm going to do is the fingers. Oh, and one more for the thumb. The thumb is actually, we'll do the thumb later. The thumb's a bit different because it doesn't have a metacarpal joint, so to speak. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to turn on vertex snapping instead of volume snapping, and we're going to extrude out the finger length straight to the end of our fingers like so. Push E to extrude, and just snap it to the end point of your fingers there. Very easy. All right. Cool. There's our fingers. And again, we're just going to just subdivide those fingers. Subdivide once more. There we go. And we got the majority of our finger joints done. All that's left is the thumb. We'll worry about the length of the finger joints in a moment. But first, let's get that thumb out the way. So I'm going to duplicate the metacarpal joint just for now. And just use, again, just use volume snapping to just get it into a general position at the base of the thumb, somewhere around there somewhere. Don't worry if the bones are overlapping, it doesn't really matter all that much. The thumb is a tricky area to begin with anyway. Especially with the joint placement at the base, it is a pain in the ass to choose the right location for the thumb. But generally speaking, just look at your own hand and see how it's articulating to see where you think the base of that rotation will end up being. All right. There we go. And sometimes volume snapping can be a bit of a pain, so you can always turn that off to get that into the right spot. All right, turn it back on to move this end of the joint or bone to around the first knuckle of the thumb, and then finally get the final knuckle in there, just around there, and then end it off with a bit of a snapping there. I'm gonna use vertex snapping to snap that thumb point joint to around there. And there we have it. We have the majority of our body structure up and running. So with a bit of tweaking now, we can work out, the joint orientations and all that sort of stuff. But first, let's rename everything to make sure that everything is set up appropriately. So starting with the base joint down here, let's call that in this case control global .001. I like to number everything that I do because it just makes things nice and organized. You know that it's the first joint of any structure, even if it's one of its own. Even it's one of a kind. I like to have it for some reason. I just do. Okay. The next thing to do is the hips. So I'm just going to go. In this case, it's a deforming joint. I like to name it with a precursor DEF for deform, and I'm going to call it hips. .001 or hip .00. Just hips. Hips is fine. Moving up to the spine, we're going to go to DEF underscore spine .001. I'm going to copy that, and the nice thing about Blender is that you can actually just hover over the name, copy it with Control C, go to the next joint, and just Control V, and it will number up the next, automatically number the next joint in the chain. Amazing. All the way up. It's going to go straight up to DEF4, and here I will go to DEF neck .001. Boom. And finally, we're going to end the middle of the joint chain down there with DEF head .001. All right, starting with the left side of our joint chain. Anything on the left side will have the definition of having the standard .l extension to any or suffix to any name. So I'm going to go with DEF shoulder .l.001. The .l.001 is really important when you get to ordering your joints properly. Always end it with .l and then the number of the joint number in Blender. It just makes it much easier. Blender understands it, and you understand once you start rigging, basically. So yeah, just work through that in that sense, in that structure. In this case, it's going to be bicep .l.001. Copy. I'm going to say forearm .l.001. And then we get to the fun nitty-gritty part, which is the hand. So I'm going to go with hand .001. And depending on how you name things, I like to just start with just index all the way from the start here, or you can call these metacarpals depending on how picky you are. But I just start with index 1, 2, 3, and 4, for instance. So I'm going to go with DEF index.l.001. And then I'm just going to copy that, paste, paste, paste. And we're good. Go to the next set of fingers, DEF underscore mid.l.001. Mid for middle finger. All right. The next one I'm going to call DEF ring .l.001. And you can say, if you want it to be more specific in case you get lost, you can always call it finger underscore ring underscore l or .l.001. It's really up to you, but I like to just call it, the def ring. There we go. And finally, we're going to go with DEF underscore pinky .l.001. Boom. Copy. Paste. 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 All right. And now finally with the thumb, DEF thumb .l.001. Copy that. Paste. Paste. All right, cool. And now we're basically ready to mirror the whole damn joint chain. So we just have to select everything here on the right side, or left side in this case. Select everything, go to Armature, Symmetrize. Boom. Done on the, at least on the legs, on the arms. So that's really good. We've got to do the feet. So let's do that one more time with the right side, the left side of the hips and the legs. So DEF underscore hips dot L dot 001. DEF dot thigh dot L dot 001. DEF dot I like to say shin or ankle, no, just say shin dot L dot 001. Copy that. DEF underscore foot dot L dot 001, and then cap it out with DEF dot toes dot L dot 001. Copy. Oh, save, sorry, not copy. Now we can mirror it. So if we mirror it now, based on the nomenclature of the suffix .l.001, Blender will know which ones to mirror because of the L suffix, and it will mirror across easily. Boom. And we got our mirrored across armature. And I gotta say, the first time I did this in Blender, I was blown away. Coming from Maya and trying to rig in Maya and mirroring bones, even if the slightest the slightest amount of offset in Maya just fucks things up when it comes to mirroring, and even mirroring animation. So to have things mirror based on a naming convention rather than on a location, rotation, and scale attribute, it's just so much fucking easier, so much better. All right, so with that in mind, we can actually test out our rig. But first, we need to fix up the joint roll on our fingers here. And the nice thing about that is, even though we have already mirrored our joints, we can actually do one hand, and the other hand will automatically orient based on the naming convention, just as it was with mirroring the joints themselves. So to do that, we have to turn on the X symmetry up in the corner here, turn that on. And notice just by me moving shit around, it automatically mirrors the edit as I work with it, not based on location, based on the naming convention. So that's why editing your naming convention to be consistent with what Blender understands is really, really important. And the great thing about that as well is that when you download rigs from other, other Blender rigs, they follow the same naming convention. So pulling them apart and learning how they're built is really, really easy. Okay, with that in mind, let's reorient these joints. So the primary axis is again on the x-axis. So I want every primary axis to be on the x-axis here. To do that, I'm going to just rotate the roll on one of these fingers, on one of these finger joints here, like so, until I get to somewhere where I'm happy with. And then I'm just going to select every other finger joint on that chain and Shift N on the active bone to align it to that bone there. Perfect. Let's do the same thing there. You can see here it's a little bit not quite aligned to that finger, so I might rotate the entire joint chain to fit. So if I hold down the Alt key on my keyboard and manipulate the roll like so, it should manipulate the whole chain in the same direction. Sometimes it doesn't though. And we can always fix up that last joint chain to fit. So I'm going to select that last one there, second last one there, active bone, and then we got an alignment there. So that looks pretty good. Let's do the same thing on that last one here on the rest of the fingers. So I'm just going to quickly do that. Boom, 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 boom. Like so. That looks good. Let's rotate this one, roll to suit our needs, like so. Boom. 1, 2, 3. Boom. Like so. There we go. Looking good. Rotate that last pinky, and I might do it from the other direction now. So 1, 2, 3, and you can see it works both ways. Easy peasy. And I might rotate them a little bit more by holding down Alt and rotate them like so. There we go. Perfect. Same thing with the thumb. So in this case, I want to know that's obviously it's an opposable thumb, so the orientation will be a little bit different. It's going to be around that way, like so. Around 90 degrees, actually, in this case. It's actually working out quite nicely. If you hold down Shift when you're playing with the roll, you get a much more incremental transition. And if you do the rest, I just align the rest with that thumb, and we're good to go. Okay, I think we're ready. And you can see that all the finger joints have been aligned, just as they have in the other side there, perfectly. So now that that's out the way, we can actually test out the rig. And you can see I got some extra poses there, so I can always fix up that pose in pose mode. Alt R to bring back the default pose. There we go. Okay, finally, the last thing we need to do is just test out the skinning of this to see how the orientation is working. And this is how we're going to cap off this video, just with a bit of quick skinning to test out everything. Alright, so with that in mind, I'm going to select all my geometry, select the rig last, and just push Control P with automatic weights. And there we go, done. Alright, and you will see that with the geometry, it's created a bunch of vertex groups to match. Just like so. And you can see we forgot to name one of our bones. I'm not sure which one it was. Bone 29. Probably something along the line there. Let's have a look. Let's try and find it. So we can actually find it in the outliner there. And most likely, if we forgot to name it, it wouldn't have mirrored either. And boom, you can see here, based on the naming convention, we missed the index finger there. So we've got to name the index finger there. There it is there. Go to the bone. Look, we forgot to name it. So let's copy that name. 1, 2, index 2, 3. Call that 3. And 4. Okay, and you can see that I'll have to mirror that again, but that's okay. We can always do that. I'm going to turn off mirroring for now. I'm going to delete these 3 bones. And then I'm just going to select these 4 bones and then mirror it to resymmetrize. And you can see it builds up the relationships just as it was before, so it still knows it's parented, which is good. And we can do a reskin now. So let's just reskin everything again. Automatic weights, and Blender's automatic weights are just, again, they're pretty freaking amazing. And we can always test it out now. So if we go into pose mode and start to manipulate our rig, you can see it's already pretty good. That's doing pretty good. That's doing pretty good. That looks looking pretty not bad. And we can talk about weight painting later on, but as a test bed, I think it's working pretty good so far. Obviously, these little ropes and stuff like that can be fixed up a little bit, but we can talk about that toward the end of our tutorial series for any sort of, I guess you can say, additional pieces, accessories. That's working pretty good. If we select all 3 joints down the chain, individual origins, we can see how the bend is working. Bending pretty good, can't complain. Obviously, we can fix up the weight paints there a little bit, and we'll talk about that in the next video, obviously. Shoulders. I like the direction. I like the way that they're manipulating there. I like the location it's at least deforming from, and we can always refine that later on. The arm is rotating in a decent manner. I think I like that. I think it's okay. Rotating in the right direction. I think I might straighten that up a little bit in the roll there. I like that. That's perfect. That's pretty much perfect. I like that as well. I like the orientation of their rotation at least. And of course the neck is working as you'd expect. In the end there. Head is rotating, and we can always, again, we're definitely going to be fixing up the head in terms of its weight paints as we add the jaw and all that sort of stuff. But to start off with, this is enough to get started. So just by testing, just to see where the articulation is happening and whether you like the articulation is really important. So if you don't like the articulation point, always go in, and you can always turn on mirroring, and just re-manipulate the joint location, like so, and then just do a reskin. So if you don't like the location as it is, just relocate the joints, put them where you want them. Sorry, I've accidentally extruded one. Relocate the joints where you want to, go out of edit mode, reskin, and then test again. And this is why we start with such a basic rig setup here, okay? Without any of that complexity of having like twist and all that sort of stuff. So we're always going to be testing as we move along. So in this instance, I might rotate the roll of my bicep here to just be a bit straighter. And I think that will look better. So if I go into pose mode now, I won't have to reskin because I'm just manipulating the roll, the orientation. And I can now see how that's rotating. And I like that more. I think I like that a little bit more. It's a bit straighter. Maybe it's a bit too strong. And you can see it's manipulating on both sides, which is really good. In edit mode, actually, I think I liked it the way it was. Oh wait, because I'm in global mode, not normal mode. So let's go back to normal individual origins or local individual origins and see how that's manipulated. No, I'm actually quite happy with that. I think I'll keep it that way. And if I select both, I'm getting a decent. That's about what you'd expect from an arm rotation, which is good. I like that. Okay, one of the other things that we have to worry about with the skinning test is the fingers. So once you've done that, it's now really easy to just test out how the fingers will deform. So if we can just grab some of our finger joints here and just go to transform pivot point and local and just rotate along the X, you could see that because we oriented those bone rolls to be accurate to our fingers, we're getting a very nice curl of the fingers. The only thing that I'm concerned about is the length of each knuckle. So I'm actually quite happy with the length of the ends there. I think that they kind of fit quite nicely. It's the length of between the first knuckle and the second knuckle that concerns me. So the first thing I want to do is, again, make sure you're in edit mode. When you're in edit mode, you have X mirroring turned on so it affects the other fingers. And that is to just scale them back a little bit so it sits around here rather than over here. And again, if you have a simple hand or finger geometry like you see here, and it looks a bit noodly, it's because we don't have enough geometry, but that's okay. We can always fix it down the line. But I think I'll manipulate the fingers to be a little bit, the first knuckles to be a little bit shorter. So let's go into edit mode, and with individual origins turned on, we can just scale those back a little bit like so. And if we do that now, we have to go back and reskin the hands. So we can just select the hands in this case because they're separate. If you have a whole body as a single geometry, that's fine too. Just reskin. And let's test those out. Make sure they're okay. And you can always fix these up at any point up until you start actually adding the controls to your fingers. So see here, I think that looks pretty fucking good. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm happy with that. That looks pretty good. And if we turn off our preview there, you can see that we're getting some pretty decent manipulation of the knuckles are sitting at the right spot around the fist, along the length of the fingers. And I'm quite happy with that, actually. Very happy. I was expecting it to be a lot more arduous. Let's test out that with regards to just making a fist in general. I'm going to manipulate the metacarpals so they just rotate a little bit tighter, so we get a more, prominent fist action. I'm quite happy with that. And you can see that we can, there's nothing wrong with a bit of manipulation, and you would do this when you animate anyway, just to get the right length. And maybe the knuckle is sitting a bit too far back, too forward on the pinky. Let's just check out the thumb. And the thumb is probably just too big, but for what we need. But that's fine. And we could probably bring back the knuckle on the thumb there a little bit. But again, it depends on the character you're working with, obviously. looking okay. It's just the length of that needs to be fixed, I think. So we can go into edit mode, shrink down that a little bit, shrink down this one a little bit. Reskin, so you can actually reskin with it in pose mode, which is another cool thing about Blender, because it bases it off the rest pose. And you can see that we can still manipulate that, but we'll worry about that later on. You have to practice that a little bit further, and it can take ages just manipulating the joints to get it to the sort of articulation that you want. And it also depends on how you intend on animating it as well, and whether you're going to see it very often. So in this case, I could probably use with moving the thumb joint down to here, maybe a little bit, manipulating this one a little bit. So let's go back into edit mode just a little bit more, and just see how they're oriented. So let's just bring this a little bit back, like so. I want to get a bit of the right curve in there, so maybe get that a little bit like that. So there's a bit of a curve going there. Bring back that knuckle a little bit, that one a little bit. Reskin. And let's just remove some of that rotation in that metacarpal there. Let's see how that looks. Still not too bad. Could probably rotate this guy a little bit more, just to get an idea of what's really going on. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Let's turn off the render preview just to see. Yeah, can't complain. The thumb again can use some work. Not too happy with that. But otherwise, we're getting there, and we can do some more refinement as we get into the actual hand rig component of our animation rig. So we won't worry about that any further. We won't worry about too much at the moment, but we'll get there in the end. So, you know, it could be anything. Just move things around if you have to. Test it out. Rebind as you'd expect. And you can see it's completely changed the way it's manipulating that. Again, it just depends on how you manipulate it and where you want to place those joints. So maybe a shorter articulation in this case would be better. And that looks a lot better. You can see just how much difference just moving those joints around just a little bit sometimes can make to the articulation of, you know, any part of the body. So in this case, the fist didn't need that really long joint for the thumb at the base, but it worked out really well when I shortened that up. So I think that's looking pretty good. Can't complain. And for a cartoony hand rig, I'm pretty happy with that setup, because again, it's not a stylized rig setup here. I can get away with a little bit there. All right. Okay, so you know, technically you can actually bring this into, say, a motion capture software like Motion Builder, or even Blender's own system for that. And this would be enough to do some decent motion capture with this rig setup. You wouldn't have to go any further. Just worth noting. But that being said, we'll leave it at that for today. So we've got our basic rig setup here. So in the next video, we'll talk about how to refine the weights on this a little bit more further. And we'll start to add a little bit more complexity as we go on. So until then, catches and have fun.